Hello, welcome to another episode of Constitutionalist Podcast. I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard. That's Leonard. It looks French. It's not. It's Leonard without an O. Thank you for tuning in. As Graham Norton used to say on his show, let's get on with the show! Joining me today is Aryeh Green. It's spelled Aryeh, and he said the easiest way to remember it is think REO Speedwagon, but Arieh. So welcome, Mr. Speedwagon. I mean Green.
Thanks very much, Joseph. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Where were you born and raised? Where are you now? Places you've been in between, that sort of stuff.
Well, I was born in Washington, D.C., and when I was 7, my family moved back out to California where my father and grandfather and great-grandfather were raised. And so I grew up basically in California, went to UC Berkeley. And in fact, I happened to be
We won't hold that against you.
Thank you very much. Exactly. I happen to be a direct descendant of one of the first Jewish families who came to North America. My family came in 1690 to the colonies. And my great, and so on, 10 generations back, grandfather was known as the Patriot Rabbi. He was the leader of the American Jewish community at the time of the Revolution. And he, in fact, was a firm supporter of the Revolution. He ended up being the representative of the Jewish community to the inauguration of President George Washington in 1782 in the federal building. So,
but of course, certain people would have us believe we're not a Judeo-Christian nation.
Right. Well, exactly, and therefore, I grew up with a very strong Jewish identity and a very strong American identity. And when I moved to Israel, which is now over 40 years ago, that's where I live now. You said, where are you now? I'm talking to you from Jerusalem, the holy city of Jerusalem. And when I moved to Israel, that was one of the big discussions in the family, was the connection, the Judeo-Christian values of America, how they came to be, how they're based on basically an understanding of modern political theory and democracy and freedom, which is based on explicitly biblical sources from the Bible, from the Talmud, Jewish tradition, and medieval philosophers, and it's a very proud part of my identity and my connection, both to my ancestral homeland here in Israel, and of course where my family has been for 10 generations there in America.
Yep, biblical community. Voluntary through free will, not worldly communism by theft and force.
Well put.
Big difference. And that's one of the main reasons why I started this show, was to highlight those differences. Jesus was not a socialist / communist.
Indeed.
You are to want to be your brothers and sisters' keeper, not done so by force.
Yeah.
At any rate, it does say in your Podmatch bio, lessons learned over a course of a 2-month solo hike across Israel: humility, acceptance, gratitude, forgiveness, and a sense of purpose. I like that. That's why I wanted to reach out and talk with you. What was the get the biblical pun in. What was the genesis of the thought to write a book?
Well, I appreciate the question, Joseph. That was actually my first book, almost now 10 years ago, called My Israel Trail. And my new book, Finding Peace in the Promised Land, which just came out, which is about the Arab-Israel conflict, actually continues the same themes of those 5, that conceptual framework of those 5 elements. So I'm happy to make the connection, and your question is a very reasonable one. They came out of lessons learned. Well, let me give one sentence in background. So the Israel National Trail is about a 700-800 mile trail which goes from the border with Lebanon in the north of Israel down to the Red Sea, or the Gulf of Eilat, which opens into the Red Sea at the south of Israel. and it goes through the hills of the Galilee, and it goes along the coast, and it goes up to the hills of Jerusalem, and down through the Negev desert, down to Eilat on the border with the Sinai Desert, and as I said, to the Gulf of Eilat, which is opens into the Red Sea. And that trek is kind of Israel's answer to the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail, or Spain and Portugal and France is the Pilgrim's Trail. But of course, it's not only a trek as in a hike with physical challenges. It is obviously an incredibly meaningful experience to anybody who is connected to our shared Judeo-Christian heritage. So I did it after a devastating divorce. I decided I had to clear my head. I went off on this solo hike, 8 weeks, 48 days of hiking, although I did not hike on the Sabbath, on Shabbat, but all alone with a 50-pound pack on my back. And it was a transformative experience, and I never expected to write a book. But in the end, the physical elements of the hike, finding myself on the side of a cliff and not thinking I could move forward, became a metaphor, for example, of what happens when somebody finds themselves divorced and doesn't know what else to do with their life, or the fact is meeting any personal challenge. Yes, whether it's
lost your sense of identity at the time. Yes,
identity, sense of purpose, sense of understanding of the world, and so for me and for many others facing personal challenges, whether it's being fired or death or divorce or what have you, that issue of acceptance became a very, very important lesson that I learned there on the side of a cliff. Which I translated, of course, to my the importance of my acceptance. Yes, this is one of my grandchildren is coming in and joining us for a moment, which is always a pleasure.
And there's the other one.
So, Noga and Aviv, you can close the door when you leave, please. Thank you. So those 5 elements that you mentioned were actually learned from the physical elements of the trail. Humility I learned while walking in the desert, hour after hour, day after day, all on my own, and recognizing the smallness of my place in the universe. The acceptance I just mentioned on the side of a cliff, where I just wasn't sure what I'm supposed to do, where I could go. I almost called the emergency services to come and save me from the side of this cliff where I couldn't move forward, I couldn't move back. I didn't know what to do. In the end, I just said to myself, Aryeh, this is your reality. You have to accept this and figure out what are the possible next steps. Nobody's going to save you from where you are. And similarly, the issue of gratitude and being full of appreciation for all the blessings in my life, the issue of forgiveness, whether it was forgiving my former wife for leaving us and breaking up the family, whether it was forgiving myself for issues that were part of what led to our divorce and her decision, whether it was forgiving God for letting it happen. These are all part of my first book, which then led to the last element was this what Viktor Frankl talks about, the man's sense of meaning, basically based on having a sense of purpose, having a goal and set of objectives in your life. And so all of those things were part of this first book that I wrote, which I'm glad to say has helped many people facing their own personal challenges. But then I basically applied those same elements to the international conflict that we found ourselves here in for the last 100 years. And so my newest book, Finding Peace in the Promised Land, basically says, look, we're going to need a lot of humility, a lot of acceptance, a lot of forgiveness, certainly a sense of shared purpose, if we're going to find a way to bring some sort of peace between not just the Arabs and the Israelis, but between the Islamist world, the Islamic world, and the wider Muslim world, and Western civilization.
Yep. I've got to back up because my audience knows I can never pass on a joke. So you started off from the creek of a little and went to the Gulf of a lot. But
That's actually cute. We used to say taking the kids down to Eilat when it would occasionally rain. Eilat is the name of this port city on the Gulf of Eilat, down which opens into the Red Sea. So we used to say we like Eilat a little when it's raining. We like Eilat a lot when it's not.
Yeah, they need to put that on a T-shirt.
Right, I agree.
Yeah. You should be on the board of visitors board. So, is there a third book in the works?
No, well, my second book, this new book just came out, and
For the benefit of people listening or whatever, we are recording actually on Monday, August the 3rd. You'll see the video behind the scenes exclusive fairly shortly after we record, but the actual play date over the audio platforms might not be until much later. So just to give
okay,
people a time reference when you say
time
recent.
right, right. Well, the official launch, which was at the Menachem Begin Heritage Center in Jerusalem, was on July 19th. So that was just a couple of weeks ago. And I'm actually planning a speaking tour in the States in November. So kind of this whole set of months over the course of the summer and the fall are kind of part of our launching event. So I think we can continue to say it's a relatively new book until January. That's my approach. Although by then, hopefully, peace will have broken out in the Middle East and it'll become passé.
Oh, let us hope and pray. But like I always say, hope is great, hope is wonderful, but it's not a strategy. And prayer is also wonderful. It's something we should do. We can't expect God to wave a magic wand without us also putting in the work for what we're praying for.
Absolutely true.
So, not sure what I want to ask next.
Well,
I got out of bed, I think, a little too early this morning. My brain hasn't fully engaged yet.
funny. Take a moment to think. I'm going to shut the door here so we have a little bit more quiet.
Okay.
But I'm here and listening. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Yeah. How many days again was the hike that you made?
The hike itself was 8 full weeks, hiking 48 days, meaning 6 days a week. 6 days a week I hiked, and on the Sabbath I rested.
That's quite a trek.
Yes, it was. It was definitely a physically and emotionally and psychologically challenging trek. There were some days which were harder than others, with great elevations or heat in the desert, and very steep climbs or descents, and some which were a little bit more easy. But even walking on the flat for 30 kilometers or 20 miles with a 50-pound pack on your back all alone for days, and that's also something of a physical challenge, and obviously emotional and psychological as well.
Were you prepared? Did you live off the land kind of through it, or did you have enough supplies to get you through it all?
That's a question I'm often asked. And in the desert, the 3 weeks of hiking through the desert takes a lot more planning. You have to actually plant or bury water supplies, or have somebody else make sure for you that there's water supplies at different points, because you can go for 2 or 3 days without coming across any sign of civilization. So yeah, that had to be planned out. I carried 5 kilos, which is what maybe 5 liters of water is, I suppose, like 2 gallons or something every day. So you had to refill that, and food, quinoa and oatmeal and some fruit and what have you. So I had to replenish. Sometimes I had people deliver to me. Sometimes I had, on the way down, buried or hidden in various different spots.
So they have DoorDash in the desert?
No, they definitely don't. We had to do it ourselves.
So when you mean deliver to you, we talking literal and airdrop, or?
So I know, because this was really this was a decade ago. Therefore, it was before the drone delivery world that we live in today. No, what I meant was there are desert jeep tour companies or individuals who will, for a fee, make sure that you have water waiting for you under a certain tree. It was like a James Bond thing. The second tree after the first rock, after the boulder.
Follow the treasure map.
Exactly. And so either that or I would have somebody meet me at a certain point or what have you. I will say something that's unique to Israel is an institution that we call trail angels. And whether it was in the desert, which also happened, but also in the north, even when you're a little bit more around civilization, trail angels are individuals, sometimes students, sometimes retirees, or just normal working people who open their homes for the through hikers of what's called the Shvil, the trail, the Israel Trail. And for free, they provide lodging, a bed to sleep in, a shower, often dinner, breakfast. Often they'll pick you up from the trailhead and bring you back if they're not actually on the trail. They'll let you do do a bit of laundry. Some of them have like resupply cupboards where they just say take whatever you want, noodles or quinoa or different things, chocolates or granola bars. So it's a unique element of Israeli society where it's kind of like a family, complete strangers who, you're in touch with them. There's a list on the internet, and you call up someone, you say, "Hi, I'm hiking through. I'm on the Shvil. I'm on the trail. Could I stay with you tonight?" And they say, "Well, we're going to be out. We're at a wedding. In fact, you don't even bother calling others in our community because it's a small community of like 70 families, and everybody's at this wedding. But you know what? We'll leave a key out for you. Please come in, make yourself at home." I mean, perfect strangers, and it's a wonderful institution in Israeli society.
I bet the chance at a shower every once in a while through the way is welcome.
Oh, believe me, the shower itself, even more so sheets, and sleeping with a pillow or having a real towel, there's the things that you take for granted that you don't recognize when you've been sleeping rough with a sleeping bag and a very thin, air mattress, very, very thin, and in a tent, on the rocks or on the dirt. So being in sheets with a pillow is like luxury.
Was that the one and only time you've done this, or have you done this before? Are you planning to do it again?
It's a reasonable question, and the answer is it was the first and only time. When I say that, it's kind of funny. I grew up in California, so I did a lot of hiking in Yosemite and in the Sierras and in the coastal range, but they were always day hikes or maybe one or two, once or twice a year when I was in high school
Yeah,
and
so
college.
it's not something you just decide to do at the drop of the hat and you go do it.
Yeah, and it's also not something I've ever done before, this kind of a trek. I'd done 1 or 2 night overnight backpacks in the mountains in California. And my kids growing up, when I was raising my kids, we did a lot of camping and day hikes, but nothing more than a one night, overnight. So the idea of 8 weeks of nonstop walking, hiking, schlepping, trekking, trudging. It was. Did I mention I had a 50-pound pack on my back? It
Right.
was, and I was 51 years old, by the way. There, the
Right. A big difference between trying to do it in your 20s and trying to do it in your
well,
50s.
precisely the real cohort. The cohort in Israel that does the Israel National Trail is usually the after the army crowd, 21-year-olds who they used to go to India or used to go to South America. They still do, but a lot of young Israelis, both religiously observant and less so, and more secular, will hike the Israel Trail as a through hike. Also, maybe 6, 8, 10 weeks in small groups. So everybody that I met on the trail was 21, not 51. So me with my 50-pound pack on my back at 51, it was something of an ordeal, and I didn't do any. I did a bit of training. I'm in pretty good shape. I bike and have biked for the last 20, 30 years, 3 times a week. And leading up to the hike, once I made the decision, which I made at the top of Half Dome in Yosemite with my daughter, who we hiked to the top of Half Dome, which was a grueling, really, really difficult challenge, psychologically and emotionally, not just physically. And we got to the top of it. This was just after she was released from her IDF, her service in the Israel Defense Forces, where she was in the intelligence unit. And just as my divorce was being finalized, we got to the top of it. I said to her, "I'm going to hike the Israel Trail." And that was, 6 weeks later, we finalized the divorce and I was out on the trail. And the kind of preparations I did was basically a couple of days. I put some rocks in a backpack to simulate the 50 pounds I was going to be hiking with, just to make sure I could do the 20 miles or so that I needed to do every day, kind of 12 to 20 miles in any average day, to make sure I wasn't, starting off with something that I wouldn't be able to finish.
That's an important disclaimer to minor tests, work your way up. I'm
Yeah.
so out of shape, I'd have trouble with 20 steps, let alone
I
20 miles in a day of a
can
hike. So,
understand that.
and I had a question, but it left my brain. My ADHD, OCD brain is in ADHD mode. It just like, whoop.
So you could ask me how I've applied these lessons to
That,
the
of
Arabic
course. I mean, I only read it at the beginning, the lessons learned over the course, and yet we didn't get there. So, indeed, how did you learn to apply these lessons? It's the
Well,
whole reason I was here to talk to you, and I'm going to forget to ask.
so,
So, thank you.
so that's all right. You may have read that I have a master's in international relations, and I worked in Israel's prime minister's office in addition to my business career, and I also spent a decade working with the foreign media who are based in or visiting Israel. And with all that experience, I also combined that with working with Natan Sharansky, who is a hero of the Jewish people and of humanity, and was one of the leaders of the human rights movement in the former Soviet Union. And I had the privilege of connecting him. One of my roles in working with him when he was the vice prime minister was to connect him with activists who were very, very strongly and powerfully involved in promoting freedom and liberty and human rights and democracy in the Middle East. And these were Arabs who self-identified as Palestinians. They were Lebanese and Syrians and Saudi Arabians and Egyptians and many others. And through that, I got to know a whole world of what I will call moderate Muslims. And by moderate, I mean the way we would define what true moderation is: tolerance, acceptance, an ideology which promotes peace and coexistence, and all of those themes were kind of part of my thinking about what peace could look like if we had a partner on the other side that really wanted peace as a real value, as opposed to wanting to either destroy Israel or kill Jews or Christians or all infidels as they described them, and take over the West. And so that was actually something that connected for me back to my studies at Berkeley, because I studied Gandhian methods of conflict resolution at UC Berkeley. Yes, back in the 80s. And yes, I was a good liberal American. And, many of us were like a Ronald Reagan or now an Alan Dershowitz or others over the years who have said, I have a certain liberal tendency to understand the importance of providing for those who are less well off in our society.
Biblical community, not worldly
Right.
communism.
Yes, precisely. And so studying Gandhian methods of conflict resolution was a very important base for me when I moved to Israel 40 years ago. That informed my understanding of what real peace could look like. But it took those 40 years wandering in the desert, as it were. It took those 40 years to appreciate how to apply those principles, and I did it through this lens of these 5 elements from my first book, from my experience on the trail. And one of the most important elements, aside from the forgiveness that is going to have to be achieved by both sides, but most particularly on the Arab side, to forgive Israel for its insistence on our existence, to forgive us for our defensive military operations, which clearly have caused death and destruction. Unfortunately, we've been forced into that position, but there's a lot of forgiveness to be worked on, including, of course, from our Jewish and Israeli community, forgiving the Arabs for their constant and violent hostile rejection of our legitimacy, of any connection between the people of Israel
That
to
one little speck over there amid that sea of Islam is
right.
not a threat to Islam. Yes.
So that that issue of forgiveness
Got an
is
intruder again.
that's okay. That issue of forgiveness is central, um, because we Jews are going to have to forgive the Arabs for the continual terror attacks and wars and death and destruction. I don't mean only October 7th. You can go back to 1929 and the pogrom in Hebron, or the Farhud, the pogrom in Iraq in 1941, and everything in between then and now.
Plenty of examples, yes.
Yeah. And so forgiveness plays an important part, and so does acceptance. The idea of accepting the legitimacy of a connection between the people of Israel and the land of Israel as our ancestral homeland, and the legitimacy of Israel's founding, all of this comes together with understanding the importance of a sense of purpose. That if the Arab and Muslim leaders inculcate in their societies, instead of a culture of death, this death worship, culture of hatred, of rejection and violence, if they inculcate not just an acceptance and forgiveness, but a sense of purpose of coexistence, then that is what's required for any real peace to be even possibly envisioned in our region. And what I do in the book, very importantly, is that I base this thesis. I base it in standard normative Islamic thought and Arab culture, meaning I go back to the Quran, to the Hadith, the commentaries on the Quran, to medieval Islamic scholars, to modern Islamic scholars, to ancient Arab cultural texts and modern pronouncements by Arab leaders, proving that this conceptual framework of a moderate Islam, of a moderate, accepting, tolerant Arab society that believes in coexistence, is not some liberal kumbaya pipe dream, but rather is part and parcel of the heritage of both Arab society and Islam, a heritage which has been hijacked by the jihadist, terrorists, Islamists who run Iran, and truthfully also Qatar and Turkey and many other nations, and obviously the terror groups like Hamas and Al-Qaeda and Islamic State and Hezbollah and the others. And they've hijacked what was a normative Islam ideology and Arab culture, and it's up to the Arab people and the Muslim people to basically go through the kind of transformation that's necessary as a condition for peace. And I always say very, very strongly, who am I, some American Israeli Jew, not even a scholar of Islam and Arab society, who am I to say, oh, you have to go through a reformation? You have to do what's right for you. I say to any time that I speak with Muslims and Arabs, you have to do what's right for you. My book and my argument is directed.
Is it right for anyone to be such suicidal lunatics?
Well, my point is, you're absolutely right. Anybody with a moral compass would agree with us that there is wrong and there is right. There is evil and there is good in this world, and murdering and raping and bludgeoning innocents, by definition, I don't care what religion you're coming from, what religious tradition, or none, is by definition morally reprehensible. But I'm going one step further, and I'm saying not only is it kind of conceptually right from almost any perspective, I'm saying something much more basic. Arabs and Muslims can and should live their life according to their values the way they see fit. However, anybody in Israel, anybody in the Middle East, anybody in Western governmental circles, American leaders, European leaders, or others, pundits, media experts and analysts, academics and cultural leaders, public figures, celebrities, anybody who cares about peace, anybody who says that they want to see peace between Jews and other Israelis and Arabs and other Muslims, have to understand that this is simply a factual reality. Without such a transformation, without an overthrow of these fanatical Islamist, jihadist, terrorist supporting regimes, there cannot be peace. That's just a fact. They can choose. The Arab and Muslim people around the world can choose to go down the path of coexistence and tolerance based on Islamic and Muslim and Arab sources, or they can choose to continue under the rule of these tyrannical dictatorial regimes. But that is a real choice. Without such a transformation, there is absolutely no chance for peace. And October 7th came to prove how hateful and extremely
And that's
ideological.
part of the big problem, all the indoctrination of the youth. They do have free will and they do have choice, but they are so inundated and brainwashed
Yeah.
that the choice is attempted to be made for them. They almost don't have I
Well,
don't
so
mean to
I
put
wouldn't.
words in his mouth, but do you know who Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is?
Sure.
Yes, see, I'm supporting him for Congress. He's running again in Arizona. He's the
Ah,
author of Reform Battle for the Soul of Islam.
right.
So, yes, there are moderate Muslims out there. It just seems their voices are drowned out by the radicals. And in fact, I'm not sure if you're aware, I wrote Terror Strikes
Yes, of
Coming
course.
Soon to a City Near You.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not all Arabs are Muslims, not all Muslims are Arabs. You know, it's a shame I got to say that disclaimer over and over.
Yeah, but one does.
Yeah,
And
and not all terrorism is Islamic, though that's the majority of what we deal with now. Like in
yeah,
my book, I go into Om Shreen Yoko, the
right.
Tokyo Christian doomsday cult, the same kind of 12er cultist mindset.
Ideology. Yes, absolutely. And so I definitely agree with that, Joseph, and that's one of the fundamental points both of my book and every time that I talk about it. The Arab world and the Muslim world does have free choice, but that doesn't mean they have freedom of action. It's very hard to live under a dictatorial, tyrannical regime. But
Good
um,
point. Yes.
but one of my arguments is actually twofold. Number one, it's up to and it's incumbent upon all of us in the West, in the free world, to support those voices of moderation, whether it's Iranians rising up against their regime, or moderate voices in Palestinian or Jordanian or Egyptian or Syrian society. It's so important that they get support, both moral support, diplomatic support, and economic support, to help them in their effort to uh, foment some sort of a revolution in their own societies. Just like the American government with its wheat sales and the SALT talks and negotiations over nuclear disarmament with the Soviet Union helped, and this is one of the things that Sharansky and Andrei Sakharov and others were very instrumental in proving, is that by using that leverage, the West helped to open up the Soviet Union society such that it led to the overthrow of that dictatorial regime by its own people once they had a taste of those freedoms. And that's
We
what we're
won
talking
the
about.
Cold War, but failed the warm, lukewarm
That's right.
peace.
So that's a
Yeah.
different issue which we don't have to go into.
Yeah.
But the point is that supporting those who are standing up against their own dictatorial, tyrannical leaders, whether it's Iran or even Turkey or within Palestinian society, Jordan and elsewhere, it's really incumbent on Western leaders in America, in Europe, and elsewhere to ensure that they have that moral clarity and don't just use the real politic of, well, this is a dictator. It's true, but he's our dictator, so we're gonna support him. But I do want to point out it's very important for us to recognize. Yes, October 7th was instrumental in helping me to publish these arguments because it became so clear to at least many of us in Israel and in America and elsewhere the kind of evil that we have to stand up against and stand strong against. But there's a positive element also in the last few years which encouraged me to publish my book, and that is, of course, the Abraham Accords.
I
Because
was going to ask you, obviously, you are a supporter of Trump and the Abraham Accords, as am I. And the one thing Jimmy Carter got right in his entire presidency was at least the semi normalization with Egypt that came out of that during that time. There would be no attempt or chance at Abraham Accords without that. So I give Jimmy Carter, the peanut farmer bad president, his at least due for that.
I think, forgive me, but I think that you're being far more generous than I would have,
Oh,
and I think that most historians also recognize that the two major players in the original Camp David Accords between Egypt and Israel were, of course, Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin. And
Yes.
they are the
Yes.
ones who deserve your praise. Jimmy Carter
More,
happened to
yeah.
be,
He
happened to be
helped
there.
mediate it a little.
And
I,
yes, I'm happy to give him
I,
some
I
credit.
would dare say that if there were a different U.S. president, it might have been a little more difficult for that to have occurred. So I think
So
he deserves a itty
I,
bitty bit amount of credit, but
so yeah,
not the majority. That's for
I'm not
sure.
arguing. I'm not arguing with you that he deserves some credit. My point is that it was the courage of both Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin who made it
Absolutely,
happen. And so
absolutely.
yes, the Abraham Accords picked up where, I mean, that was obviously 1979, 1981, and since then, all the other accords that we've had, the peace agreement with Jordan, the Oslo Accords with which created the Palestinian Authority, these were not in the same spirit at all, because Anwar Sadat said, "I accept the conceptual framework that the people of Israel are indigenous to the land of Israel and have the right to their reestablished sovereignty in their ancestral homeland." And the Jordanian the peace agreement with Jordan, I think actually King Hussein had a similar attitude, but unfortunately both of them were succeeded by governments that allowed their educational frameworks, their media, their government to become extremely hostile to Israel and Jews and the West. And until the Abraham Accords, we didn't have another, and to say nothing of Yasser Arafat and then Mahmoud Abbas and their hostility to
Yeah.
any legitimacy given to a Jewish
Not to even
connection.
go into the 5 times they rejected a chance at a
Oh, absolutely, and
Palestinian
not just
state.
five. You can go back.
Yeah.
You can go back 8 times the Palestinians and dozens of times all the Arab world, going back to 1917, if you will, or even before. But the Abraham Accords were significant, not because, oh great, another peace agreement with another Arab country, but exactly because, and Donald Trump and the others that were involved do receive a decent amount of credit for negotiating and encouraging and pushing the Abraham Accords. But again, the leaders of Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Sudan and Morocco deserve obviously the bulk of the credit. Because what happened here was, and I quote them in my book extensively, the leaders of Bahrain, the leaders of the United Arab Emirates, these are leaders who have said, we as Arab Muslims, and including religious leaders from the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco, we as Arab Muslims declare that the people of Israel have a natural place here in the Middle East. They are integral parts of the Levant. We welcome them. We embrace them, Israel, the country, the nation state, as well as the Jews. And we believe that the future is one of coexistence as an Islamic and Arab value. That kind of a statement in the last few years went well beyond even Menachem Begin's statements, and it was reflective, which is why I use them extensively in my book as points of reference.
The question is, do they mean it, or are they just
Absolutely.
mouthing the words?
Absolutely, and I can reassure you on that from every standpoint, including as a businessman. I have been in Bahrain and twice in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai, and I walk into supermarkets in Bahrain where there are tables with Israeli cherry tomatoes saying in a big sign, "Made in Israel," with Israeli flags. And when I use the word embrace, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about diplomacy or words or signed agreements. I'm talking about the
Actual integration.
not even just integration and interaction. I'm talking about an ideological acceptance, acknowledgement, and embrace of an entire worldview that rejects categorically that oppositional rejectionist front by Islamic Jihad and Hamas and Iran and the others who attempt to claim that Islamic thought and Arab pride and Arab culture and Islamic theology by definition is against the idea of either independent religious thought like for Jews, Christians, or others, and is against the idea of a connection between the people of Israel and the land of Israel, or legitimacy of the founding and the existence of the modern nation state of Israel. The kind of statements that we're hearing and have heard in the last 10 years from the United Arab Emirates leaders and Morocco, and the King of Morocco has always been more moderate than many of his counterparts throughout the Arab and Muslim world, and Bahrain, are actually important markers of this kind of transformation that we're talking about. And that's why it's really important to recognize it's not just the death culture and the death worship and the culture of hatred that led to October 7th, just like it led to, now we're at the 25th anniversary of 9/11. You know, it's not just that we're recognizing the power of that ideology and how we have to stand strong against it. We, all of us in the West, in the free world, led by Israel and America.
And more importantly, within Islam, reform can only come from within, truly.
So right, and so that's what I'm saying. It's not just the negative aspect of opposing such a hostile and violent ideology of the Islamist jihadists. It's also important to recognize the positive element of the real changes in behavior and ideology and even theological perspectives that we've seen through the Abraham Accords by these real moderates in Arab and Muslim society, including at the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and the like. So that's what makes me hopeful, by the way. That's what gives me hope, makes me optimistic. I am an optimist by nature, but I've been privileged to meet and to interact with some of these truly moderate Muslims and Arabs, and that's what gives me hope. Now, I don't know, is this kind of a transformation going to come about leading to peace with Israel and the West in the next 2 months, or the next 2 years, or the next 2 decades, or the next 2 generations? I don't know, but I am confident it will happen just as it happened with the former Soviet Union.
Yeah, well, you mentioned hope again, and as I say, hope is great, hope is wonderful, so is prayer, but it's not a strategy. We must work. And you also mentioned element again, so I'm going to quasi tongue-in-cheek go back to the start. The humility, acceptance, gratitude, forgiveness, and sense of purpose, those value elements that you had clarified to you while you were out in the weather element. See what I did there?
Right.
Anyway, that's what makes me the best show on the internet. I'm kidding, people. I don't suffer hubris. That's a joke, people. Others will know at anyone viewing this as a first episode. I need to throw that in there. That's a joke. Yeah. I'm making fun. So now, where can people find you? Do you have a website?
Thank you for asking, Joseph. The answer is, I think the easiest thing is, first of all, I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn primarily. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, but mostly and Substack. But Facebook and LinkedIn, you can look up Aryeh Green, like you spelled it, Aryeh, green like the color, and connect with me. Also, I welcome, especially people who've read the book who want to either ask questions or argue with me. I welcome comments, input, and feedback at aryeh.green@gmail.com is my email, aryeh.green, like the color, @gmail.com. And so there's a website for my first book, myisraeltrail.com, but that's not, I don't have a website for my book that just came out, Finding Peace in the Promised Land, but it can be found on Amazon and every major platform. So can My Israel Trail.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate the time.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate your interest, and so do my grandkids.
Yeah, the kids. I think the kids are about to go crazy now. They need you back. Yeah. All right.
I'll put them to bed.
Have a good one.
Hope is great, we need more hope, but it in itself is not a strategy. Shall be known by fruits, action God demands of you and me. Hope is a whisper, a pretty thought, a warm blanket when battles are fought. But a whisper won't win, no, not a single fight. Gotta stand up and shout with all of your might, yeah. Hope is fine, it's a lovely thing. But hope is not a strategy, no, it ain't a strategy. You gotta move your feet, gotta feel that beat. Hope is not a strategy for you and for me. Talk is cheap, a dime a dozen phrase. Pretty words spin through all of your days, but action speaks louder. Thunder is sound when your boots hit the ground. No turning around. We can dream big dreams, paint pictures in our head, but if we just sit still, we might as well be dead. The fruits of our labor are what the world will see, not just what we wish for, but what we choose to be. 'Cause hope is not a strategy, no, it ain't a strategy. You gotta move your feet, gotta feel that beat. Hope is not a...
Like and subscribe to Constitutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help. Thank you for having tuned into another Constitutionalist Podcast show. I really appreciate that you stopped by. Again, please like, share, subscribe. We need you to help spread the Constitutionalist movement. Thank you again. Take care. God bless. Love you all.